What happens when you think you found freedom, but instead you lose everything? Scotty thought she had the perfect plan. Her relationship had started to feel stagnant, and the idea of an open relationship seemed like the perfect escape, a chance to reconnect with herself, to find excitement again. But what she didn't expect was that the very thing she sought would tear apart everything she held dear. In the search for freedom, Scotty didn't realize she was walking straight into a trap of her own making. Now with her world in shambles, she's forced to confront a painful truth. Freedom doesn't always come without a price, and the price she paid was far steeper than she ever imagined. Could it be that what she was truly searching for was not freedom, but something deeper, something she had lost long ago? Scotty stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the hem of her dress, her mind racing with conflicting thoughts. A week ago, she had proposed something daring, something that had once felt like an opportunity to rediscover herself. She had suggested to her husband, Jackson, that they open their relationship. At first, it felt liberating, like a fresh start. She had wanted to explore, to feel alive again, away from the routine that had been slowly suffocating her. Jackson had agreed, hesitant but willing, and for a while, it seemed like the perfect way to reclaim a sense of independence and excitement. But now, as she looked into the mirror, Scotty couldn't ignore the unease growing inside her. Something had shifted. Jackson seemed distant, withdrawn. Was this really the freedom she had wanted? Or was it a mistake? Every step forward felt like a step further away from the connection they once shared, and the more she tried to embrace her newfound freedom, the more she felt like she was losing herself. For months, Scotty had felt trapped in a marriage that once brought her joy but now felt stagnant. The routine was overwhelming, the connection she and Jackson once shared slipping away with each passing day. She had dreams of self-exploration, of rediscovering parts of herself she had neglected. It was in this moment of uncertainty that the idea of an open relationship emerged. At first, she thought it would be the solution, a way for both of them to grow independently while still staying together. She had been so certain that it was the answer, so she gently broached the subject with Jackson one evening. "What if we explored other relationships, just to find ourselves again?" she had asked, her voice hopeful. Jackson's response was not immediate. His brow furrowed as he considered it. He didn't want to lose her, but the thought of her being with someone else stirred unease. After some hesitation, he agreed, albeit reluctantly, wanting to please her and keep their bond intact. But deep down, a sense of dread lingered, and the consequences of this decision would soon begin to unfold in ways Scotty couldn't foresee. At first, things seemed fine. Scotty felt liberated, exploring the idea of new connections and rekindling parts of herself she had long forgotten. But as the days passed, Jackson became distant. It started subtly at first, less conversation, fewer shared moments. But soon it was undeniable. He would retreat to his study for hours, lost in his own thoughts, barely acknowledging her presence. When she tried to reach out, he would offer a distracted smile, a half-hearted response, but there was a coldness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. It was as if the man she had known and loved was slipping through her fingers, and she couldn't grasp him. Scotty began to question herself. Had she pushed him too far with her request? Had she asked for something that he couldn't give? Her attempts at normal conversation felt strained, and her once warm, comforting home now felt empty. The loneliness crept in like a constant companion, each day leaving her more confused and isolated. Why wasn't Jackson engaging with her the way he used to? And why did she feel like she was the one losing something, even though she was the one who sought the change? Anxiety gnawed at her as she realized she might have misjudged the situation, and with every passing moment, she felt like she was sinking further into a relationship she couldn't seem to fix. Scotty dove headfirst into the new world she had created, exploring the freedom that she had so longed for. She began going out more, meeting new people, and feeling the rush of attention that had once been absent. There was a thrill in the encounters, an exhilarating sense of liberation that came from the unfamiliar. For a while, it felt like she was finally living the life she had imagined, unburdened, independent, and free to pursue her desires without restraint. But as time passed, That excitement began to fade. What had once been an escape soon became an overwhelming chase for something she couldn't quite grasp: the novelty of new experiences. Wore off, and beneath the surface, guilt began to creep in. Scotty couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. She wasn't feeling fulfilled, not the way she had hoped. Each new encounter left her with an emptiness that only seemed to grow as she realized that the freedom she had sought didn't bring her the answers she had hoped for. She had been so sure that exploring other people would fill the void, but it only seemed to deepen it. Was this freedom really what she had been searching for? It was subtle at first, but then it became impossible to ignore. Jackson, who had once been an active part of her life, had completely withdrawn. He no longer engaged in conversation with her, and every time she tried to communicate, whether about their open relationship or anything else, he seemed completely indifferent. His responses were curt, and his gaze was distant, as if he wasn't really seeing her anymore. Scotty's heart ached as she tried to reach out, but each attempt felt like it was hitting a wall. The emptiness inside her grew with every passing day, and no matter how many people she met or how much attention she received, she felt more alone than ever. She had wanted freedom, yes, but not at the cost of losing Jackson. The silence between them was deafening, and as the distance between them widened, Scotty couldn't help but feel that she had lost something she could never get back. For the first time, she questioned her choices. Had she really wanted freedom? Or had she been searching for something she couldn't find in the arms of strangers? Now, as she sat alone in their home, the weight of abandonment pressed on her chest, and the reality set in. She wasn't just losing Jackson, she was losing herself. Scotty couldn't ignore the growing chasm between them any longer. The cold interactions had built up to a boiling point, and she knew that if she didn't confront Jackson now, they would continue to drift further apart. One evening, as they sat in their living room in uncomfortable silence, Scotty finally asked, her voice trembling, "What's really going on, Jackson? Why are you shutting me out?" Jackson looked at her, his face tired and worn, and for the first time in months his walls came down. "I'm not happy, Sam," he admitted, his voice raw, the weight of his confession hanging in the air. "This open relationship, it's not what I thought it would be. It's only pushed me further away from you. I thought I could handle it, but I can't." The words hit Scotty like a punch to the gut. Her heart sank as she realized the true cost of her pursuit for freedom. She wanted to speak, to apologize, but the words caught in her throat. Both of them sat there, raw and vulnerable, with no answers, just a painful silence between them. The realization hit her hard. Perhaps freedom wasn't the solution, and now everything they had built was crumbling, leaving them both lost. The confrontation was the beginning of the end. Jackson's pain was evident, and as he stood up to leave, Scotty felt a wave of disbelief wash over her. "You can't just walk away," she pleaded, her voice breaking, but Jackson was resolute. "I can't stay here anymore, Sam. I've tried, but I'm not who I was before all of this. I'm done." His words felt like a crushing blow, and no matter how much she begged or reached for him, he remained steadfast, turning away. Scotty's heart shattered in that moment, the weight of his decision sinking deep into her chest. She watched as he packed his bags, unable to stop him. He was leaving, and she felt like she was losing everything: her husband, her hopes for their future, and the very essence of the life she had built. The freedom she had fought so hard for had come at an unbearable cost, and now she was left with nothing. Life without Jackson felt like a constant ache in her chest. Scotty tried to keep busy, throwing herself into work, going on a few aimless dates, but nothing seemed to fill the emptiness that had consumed her. The freedom she thought would liberate her had only made the loss more pronounced. Every night she lay awake, staring at the empty side of the bed, wondering where it all went wrong. She realized now that the excitement of new experiences and fleeting connections couldn't replace the deep emotional bond she once had with Jackson. As days passed, She found herself drifting further into despair. She had wanted freedom, but never imagined it would come with such a heavy price. The silence in her home was deafening, and every attempt to find solace outside of it only reminded her of the void that Jackson's absence had left behind. She had everything she thought she wanted, but nothing that truly mattered. Scotty's heart skipped a beat when she saw the post, a picture of Jackson smiling, his arm around another woman. The image seemed to freeze time, and a wave of betrayal crashed over her. How could he move on so quickly? Was she ever truly enough for him? Anger bubbled. Inside her, but so did a gnawing feeling of inadequacy. The woman in the picture seemed so different from her, so full of life and joy. Did Jackson find someone who could give him what she couldn't? As the shock wore off, another painful thought surfaced. Was he already emotionally distant before they broke up? Had he checked out long before their separation, and she had just been too blind to see it? Her emotions were a whirlwind of confusion, hurt, and disbelief. Should she confront him and demand answers, or just let go for good and move on with her life? The choice was hers, but nothing felt clear anymore. Scotty stood in front of Jackson and his new partner, the rage inside her simmering. "I need answers," she demanded, her voice shaking but firm. "How could you just move on like this? What happened to us?" Jackson's expression was unreadable as he shifted uncomfortably, his gaze flickering between her and his new partner. Scotty refused to back down, determined to show him she was no longer the same vulnerable woman he had left behind. "You left me," she pressed, "and now you're pretending everything's fine. Tell me the truth. Was I ever enough for you?" Jackson's face hardened, and he deflected, his words cold and dismissive. "You made your choices. Don't act like this is all my fault." Scotty's chest tightened. His indifference stung, and she could feel her anger and heartbreak rise, but she stood her ground. She was tired of fighting for someone who didn't care. As she looked into his eyes, she realized that the man she once loved had already moved on, while she was still tangled in the past. The confrontation only deepened her confusion, leaving her questioning everything. What went wrong? Where did they go astray? After the confrontation, Scotty felt a shift deep within her. It wasn't Jackson she needed answers from. It was herself. She'd been searching for freedom and validation in all the wrong places. Through Jackson, through fleeting relationships, through external experiences. She realized that true freedom couldn't be found in someone else's arms or in the constant pursuit of novelty. It had to come from within. She had been trying to fill a void she couldn't understand until now. Scotty began embracing her own independence, rediscovering passions she had neglected. She poured herself into her career, reignited old hobbies, and started prioritizing her well-being. Slowly but surely, she built herself back up. No longer defined by the relationship that had crumbled, Scotty became a stronger, more self-assured woman. She understood that freedom wasn't about leaving behind everything familiar. It was about accepting and loving herself fully. And in that self-acceptance, she found peace. Scotty moved forward, letting go of the past and focusing on her healing. Her life was no longer a mirror of the failed relationship with Jackson. She surrounded herself with people who uplifted her, found joy in her own company, and slowly rebuilt her sense of self-worth. The pain of losing Jackson was still there, but it no longer had a hold over her. In this process, Scotty found strength she hadn't known she had. She understood that true closure didn't come from another person. It came from within, through forgiveness, acceptance, and self-love. As she stepped into her future, she felt a sense of empowerment she hadn't felt before. She had found herself again, not through Jackson or any relationship,